Long-term care, can I self-insure? This is a question that I got a couple days ago, actually from an uncle of mine. He said, I've done well, I'm 6 years old, I have about 3 million that I can fall back on. Should I self-insure for long-term care, or what's the big deal about long-term care insurance? And my answer to him was absolutely consider insurance. In this video, we're going to tell you why. I'm Shannon Dow, and I have my partner Michael Gerali on with me as well. We're from Healthcare Genius, and we are here to educate you on all things healthcare and retirement. So, Michael, I'm sure you're not surprised by what my response was to him. Absolutely do not consider self-insuring, even if you've got the means to do so. And why is that?
There's all sorts of things that make sense to self-insure, and certainly if you have enough wealth, you may decide that it doesn't make sense to purchase a long-term care policy or some sort of a hybrid policy. But in most cases, we believe it's one of the best things that people can be doing to protect themselves against the future. The incidence of Alzheimer's and dementia is expected to double by the year 2050. Those are the concerns that we see for most people, is when somebody gets a cognitive impairment. It isn't that average 2 years or 2.5 years that everyone hears about for long-term care costs. It can be 5 years, 10 years. I mean, we've heard all sorts of horror stories. We have family members and know people who have had 10 years plus where they were caring for a loved one who had dementia. So we certainly don't believe that in our practice, that self-insuring for most people is the right way to go.
Yeah, and I think the numbers can just really grow way more quickly than people anticipate. Last year, the average cost of a nursing home for over the course of a year was about $100,000 just for 1 year. So what it's going to be 20 years from now is going to look a lot different. For my uncle who's 60, I said, yeah, if you needed it today, that's about what it would cost you if you needed it later on, which is more likely, even though it's not unheard of to need long-term care services when you're younger. It's actually more common than people think. But, the longer out that is, the more expensive it's going to be. And another factor, particularly for people that have done a really good job of planning and that are wealthy, they don't want to go in a nursing home. They want to, if they need services, they want somebody to come to them. They want to stay in their homes. That's really common. And so for those individuals, that's just an additional cost. So these costs creep up. For people that don't really understand how long-term care works, it's not covered by Medicare, and it's very, very expensive, and it only gets more expensive every year.
That's right, Shannon. It can be very expensive. And, if you're self-insuring, then you are a family member, and in most of the cases, it's a family member. If something happens to you, they have to decide which assets to liquidate. So what are they going to pick to liquidate to pay for that year of nursing home care, or 3 years, or 5 years? The other thing that we see is averages. Everyone uses averages. Well, because the average is 2.5 years, you don't really need to worry about much more than that. But when you're looking at insurance, you're really looking at worst case scenario. So for most of our clients, they're not necessarily worried about the 2 years, but what they are worried about is ruining their financial plan because somebody comes down with a cognitive impairment and they're having to spend $100,000, $150,000 a year over a 10-year period. And even if they have the wherewithal to do that, it's not really a very good use of money. Most of these policies now have all sorts of options that if you don't use them, there's a benefit to your heirs, in most cases through a death benefit or even a return of premium benefit. So there's almost no reason not to incorporate this into your financial plan, because you can look at it just as another bucket, another investment bucket, versus the traditional long-term care insurance that was out there was definitely you paid premiums, and if you never used it, they went away.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's kind of the biggest pushback that we hear, is that people think, hey, I don't want it to be like my homeowner's insurance or my car insurance where it's use it or lose it. There are so many different types of products that are more advanced and more usable than the traditional plan.
Shannon, the other thing, we were listening to a national pundit the other day talk about it, and their in their particular video, they mentioned that they recommended people buy long-term care insurance at the age of 60. So like your uncle who just turned 60. Unfortunately, those are really tough recommendations in our eyes to make, because you never know if somebody's going to be healthy enough at age 60 to actually qualify for a policy. And that gets forgotten a lot in all of the advice out there, is that insurance is still something that you have to get underwritten for in most cases, meaning you have to pass a physical, you have to pass a cognitive test, and with regards to these types of policies in most cases. So, they're not necessarily the easiest thing to get. Therefore, you should be looking at these earlier than later. And also, the premiums a lot of times are less when you're buying them younger, and you can make sure that they're paid up in some policies at age 65. So when you hit retirement, you know that that's taken care of, and you've checked that off your list, and you have that peace of mind and security that if something happens to you or your spouse, you're going to be covered.
Absolutely. And just one other thing that I did want to point out is availability. So your traditional long-term care insurance is not the most affordable type of insurance, but there are a lot of different options. Like Michael had mentioned, that hybrid life insurance long-term care product is a phenomenal option for a lot of people. And there are also different types of life insurance products that have riders on them that actually do cover long-term care costs should you need it. They just reduce the death benefit by that much. So for example, you could have an indexed universal life policy or even a term policy with this living benefits rider is what it's called. And if something happens and you need long-term care services, you can actually have access to the majority of that death benefit without having to pass away. So there are a lot of great options out there. And whether you're looking at life insurance or a long-term care life hybrid product or just straight long-term care insurance with that return of premium, like Michael had mentioned, lots of really good options that you really can do on any budget.
A lot of people by the time they're retired may have their home paid off, and yet they continue to pay their property casualty insurance in case something happened, a flood, a fire, anything would happen to your home, and yet it's paid off. Well, if you think of your investment portfolio the same way, that's really what long-term care insurance is doing. It's no really different than what your homeowner's insurance is, in the sense that you're just trying to protect an asset or a set of assets against something bad happening. In this case, you having a loss of 2 of 6 activities of daily living or some sort of a cognitive impairment.
Absolutely. Your biggest asset is yourself, your mind, your body, and so why wouldn't you protect those things? So these are some of the things that I told my uncle. If you have any more questions or you want to learn more about long-term care insurance, feel free to let us know in the comments below. You can also apply to become a client of ours if you're interested in purchasing one of these products. You can do that in the description below. And make sure you subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell so you know when we come out with new content. If you like this video, feel free to give it a like and let us know how we can help. We're here to help. Again, it's Shannon and Michael with Healthcare Genius.